And before we get started, we always like to do a GHI member spotlight. Christopher Walmuth Design, along with the Oak Park District, Illinois, is leading a design competition coming off of their recent Net Zero Recreation Center that had an addition added of a Passive House LEED Platinum project. So this is a project in addition to that. They're doing a renovation and or replacement of their current field center. And this gives you the chance to submit plans and will reward truly and thoughtful, innovative design that meets the ever-evolving needs of their community. So you can learn more and get involved at pdop.org at Concept Design. And this is who Green Home Institute members are. And this is what Green Home Institute members do. And so can you. Go check out our website and learn more to get signed up. All right, well, welcome everyone to using Building Science Advisor to determine the durability of building envelope components. Before we get started, a huge thanks to our top tier sponsor, Mitsubishi. Very thankful for their air source heat pump technology with hyperheat that works down in the coldest of cold technologies. Another cold snap winter I made it through, being all electric on their ducted air source heat pump systems, completely comfortable and no problems at all without any backup resistance heat. And now they have a Hyperheat Plus that gets down even colder, still maintaining the loads on the home that are needed. If you're too nervous to go all electric, that's okay. If you have an existing gas furnace, you can pair their IntelliHeat system to work with the condenser on the outside in the summer as an air conditioning and on the swing seasons, and then still use that gas furnace in the winter as needed. They have a whole website dedicated to trying to help you figure out the Inflation Reduction Act rebates and how to pair the indoor with the outdoor units. If you want to go ductless, they have not only their traditional ductless mini splits, but ones that can be hidden behind the walls. And they have ducted mini split systems you can check out as well. So go to MitsubishiComfort.com and check out all the resources they have to help you decarbonize and electrify. All right, well, welcome everyone again to using Building Science Advisor to determine the durability of building envelopes and components. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. And today I'll be your moderator. My name is Brett Little. I'm the education manager here. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units, as well as certified Green Home Professional designation in our health, materials, and energy pillar. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. And you can check out our Certified Passive House Consultant CEUs at the end as well. So with that, I am super excited to hand it off to our speaker, Andre here with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And Andre, it's good to have you out here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, and please take it away.
So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day. If you're like me and have forgotten to get flowers or chocolate, you have a stop on your way home before you run into your significant other. I going to talk this morning about the Building Science Advisor. This is a tool that's been under development for about 3 years. The work has been funded by the Department of Energy, so I hope at the end of the presentation you'll agree that at least some of your tax dollars are hard at work and doing something effective. But the tool is it's a web-based tool, and it's intended to look at either new construction or retrofit construction and determine whether the design that you're planning for new construction or the retrofit that you're planning to update existing construction isn't causing a moisture durability problem. And it also looks at any energy improvement that you're making along the way. So I think that all of you will agree that moisture is probably the cause of most building envelope related energy problems, other than a couple of issues that Mother Nature throws at you, like fire in a hurricane, even though in a hurricane, probably most of the damage is caused by the hurricane is water intrusion into the building after the envelope has been compromised through the wind. But virtually all other problems associated with the building envelope can be traced back to water. Your insulation products lose their R value when they get wet. Mold begins to grow on inside the walls or on the surfaces of the walls when you reach high levels of relative humidity. Metal components corrode, wood rots, bugs are attracted to wet environments. And of course, you have all the aesthetics issues of staining and algae growth, exterior facades. So the purpose of the Building Science Advisor is to try to reduce or eliminate the impact that moisture plays in the buildings industry. How can we come up with designs that will not have the problems that are listed above? So what is the issue? I think all of us are racing towards 2050, and that's really not very far away. And buildings contribute a substantial amount of carbon. So what we want to do, of course, is to reduce the carbon impact of buildings. And there are two ways of doing that. One is to make buildings more energy efficient, which reduces operational carbon. And the other is to substitute a lot of the materials that we're using that have high embodied carbon with newer materials that reduce the embodied carbon. Both of these are leading to changes in the way that we build. And I think, there's certainly some reticence in adopting high performing envelope systems. And builders, contractors, architects, I get it. It's you want to be comfortable in terms of your design, and the most comfort is gained by building something that was similar to something that you built a year ago or 2 years ago that has a proven track record. If we start pushing you into buildings that are more airtight, buildings that have higher levels of R value, you're kind of getting into an area that you don't have a lot of experience in, and therefore there's concern that there might be problems there. I think you also would agree that our new building envelopes are much less tolerant to moisture or design flaws and installation flaws. We never heard about mold problems in our grandparents' homes or even our parents' homes. And the reasons were, the walls were so leaky that if water did get in there, within a day, it had evaporated by all the air that was flowing through that wall. Or there was very little insulation, so we had big temperature differences, which could push that water back out into the exterior environment or into the building where your air conditioning system could reject it. Now that we've made buildings a lot more energy efficient, where every time we add a new requirement on our building envelope, there are fewer and fewer workable solutions. And we need to be more clever and maybe even use some science to determine what works. And that's part of what we're trying to accomplish with the BSA. And I also think it's likely to say that what people need is something that they can access quickly and has some credibility. And so hopefully this tool is trying to address that. Can we put something in the hands of builders that they can get instantaneous responses from, and believe that that information is correct because it's coming from a reliable source, right? This is from your government. Trust me, it's got to be good, right? Okay, so the laboratory here has been working on dealing with moisture for as long as I've been here, and this has been a major issue. When we first started looking at moisture control in building envelopes 25 years ago, we didn't have hydrothermal models like we do today. So we've been working over the years to develop a hydrothermal model that's aimed to the U.S. Construction practices, typical envelope constructions. And so what we have been doing over the years is adding materials and system properties to the models. Most of the models are European. And of course, a lot of the European constructions are much more, they're different than how we build here, right? They're much more masonry construction there. So the tools coming from Europe didn't have the materials and the material properties that were needed to do hydrothermal modeling on traditional US construction. So we've worked a lot on that. We've also done a lot of work on trying to validate the models, comparing it to lab experiments, comparing it to field experiments. A lot of people feel that a model, you can get any answer you want out of a model, and you probably can. You have lots of knobs and buttons that you can twist and dial and turn. But you also, if you're true to the model and don't try to match the answer, you want to prove that the physics in the models are correct. And I think we've gotten to the point now where we have a lot of faith in the physics of these hydrothermal models. Then we want to use these models, and there are two places where we want to use them. One is to develop codes, and ASHRAE is in the process of developing a standard at some point in the hopefully not too distant future. Will actually add to the IECC a durability standard where you have to run a hydrothermal model to demonstrate that your construction is durable. The ASHRAE standard is there. It's not perfect. Nobody's tried to write a standard around durability, and so it's kind of like an interesting adventure. But it's been in the process for a number of years, and it's getting pretty good. So that's one task. But the other task is we want to have a simplified tool, something that somebody, you don't need to run a hydrothermal. You don't have to have the knowledge to run a hydrothermal model. And the example that I like to use is you're a builder or a contractor, you show up on the job site and you had ordered a permeable water resistant barrier, and there's a roll of impermeable water resistant barrier sitting on the job site waiting to be applied. And the question is, can I make the substitution and the structure will still be durable? Well, you don't want to hire a consultant and wait 2 weeks to get that answer. You want the answer right now. And something that's simple like that is kind of what we were trying to accomplish with the building science advisor. Uh, a builder can go in as long as he knows how the wall is constructed. He inputs the layers, assuming he knows where the building is. I trust he probably has that information. He tells the model that. He runs the model with the two materials and compares their performance and can, in 5 minutes, determine whether he can make that material substitution or not. So the simplified tool doesn't cover all applications. It doesn't replace consultants. It doesn't replace modeling, but it's a one significant figure type of tool that can give you a yes, no answer pretty much instantaneously. So, let's look at moisture control from different perspectives, and let's start off with builders. So here's a typical building that's constructed in the hot and humid southeast. Somebody told me that this is just outside of Atlanta, and if you look at this building, the architect did a lot of things right. First of all, he's built a durable construction, right? This building has been there for 500 years, longer than Atlanta's been there, right? So somebody had the foresight to build this in that area. Uh, Obviously durable. Durability plays well into embodied carbon. If you don't have to rebuild the envelope or replace components of the envelope for an extended period of time, you're reducing the embodied carbon content of this envelope. They built it with mass, right? You got a lot of thermal inertia here. So good in certain parts of the southeast. You can short circuit some of the solar load. In the swing seasons, you can reduce your energy demand because you have a thermally massive system. They put in cool surfaces, right? The whole building has light colored surfaces, projecting that summertime air conditioning load that's created by the solar radiation striking the building. But most importantly, they did the right thing with water. They've created a pond in front of the building instead of putting the water in the building envelope by allowing leaks and cracks through that building, which is going to cause obviously substantially significant problems. So on a little bit more of a serious note, Home Innovation Research Labs, I think most of you are probably familiar with this organization. This used to be a kind of the research arm of the National Association of Home Builders. They petitioned their membership. This is a survey that's maybe 4 or 5 years old now. And they gave the membership a list of 14 items, which they thought were challenges for the builders, and said, okay, can you prioritize this list? And the two top selected items were both moisture performance issues. Number one was moisture performance in walls and moisture performance in attics. So builders realized that moisture is a major concern. Obviously, if it's a major callback, then that's impacting their bottom line, and they want to come up with systems that will not will reduce the number of callbacks that they have related to moisture intrusion into the building envelopes. So kind of another perspective is, a manufacturer. Well, is a manufacturer concerned about moisture control? Of course they are, right? Whenever you have a lawsuit brought against, because of a building that's failed, uh, the complainants are always going to include the manufacturers because they have the deep pockets, and they're going to get dragged into the lawsuit whether or not their products are liable or not. So reducing the number of lawsuits associated with building envelope defects, or reduce the number of defects, is a major concern of manufacturers. How about the building scientists? Most of you folks are probably building scientists. So here's a residential building. I think the occupant of this building is extraterrestrial, but if you're the consultant who had worked on this building, and the absentee homeowner, contacted you and said, "Hey, there's problems with this building. You need to show up and help me with this problem." So you drive to the building site and you go into the building, and the owner comes in and says, "Okay, take a look at this. I was moving some furniture around, and look what I found behind the building, behind the furniture. Look at that. Look at that. That's mold, isn't it? And I'm gonna die now, right?" But so you're looking at it now. This is kind of, this is the building scientist point of view. So, what do you think? You say, well, that's interesting. What caused this problem? Was that moisture leakage? Was that diffusion? What happened? Of course, that's an interesting way of looking at it, because you're kind of thinking that you want to figure this out because you want to solve the problem for other similar problems, similar issues for other buildings. It's not just this one building. But of course, the building owner doesn't give a hoot what was the hydrothermal transport mechanism. He just wants the problem to go away, right? So talking about the homeowner, okay, so you live in one of these buildings, probably the big one, and you're driving home, and your significant other calls you and says, "Oh, hurry up, you got to get home. I was moving furniture around, and when I did that, look what I found. Look at this. What is that green stuff all over this wall?" And you show up, and you're a homeowner now. You don't have the background of a building scientist, so your reaction is probably what Macaulay Culkin went through in Home Alone, right? Oh my God! There are four symbols there. I'm not sure what word that represents, but you're gonna freak out, right? I mean, this is your house. Like, oh no, not another problem. Last week it was the dishwasher, and now my house is falling apart. But everybody, appreciates that moisture is a significant problem, and we all look at it differently. But at the end of the day, we got to do something to figure out how to fix this problem. So, how big is the problem? Uh, so, interestingly enough, and I was surprised when I found this report, but back in 2018, the Federal Reserve Bank, of all people, did a survey. They were interested in determining uh, what was the amount of money being spent by homeowners and building occupants to repair and maintain their homes. And this was associated with the fixing of mortgage rates or interest rates. They were trying to determine what would be the impact if we raised or lowered the interest rate with respect to home repairs. And so they sent out 100,000 questionnaires to people who are participating in a limited census. And from the information that they received, they were asking people, well, have you done repairs on your home? How many repairs have you done over the last year? What were the nature of the repairs? And they gave them some bin answers to respond to. And what they found was that about $130 billion a year was being spent to repair homes. So it was obviously a substantial number. I mean, if you look at the construction industry is a couple of trillion, you're talking about, 5 to 10% of the construction industry is associated with just fixing the problems that were that have manifested themselves over the last year. And the sad part was that they found that people who in low and moderate income paid more almost a third more than people that were more affluent. And they didn't conjecture, they didn't answer why that occurred. But the concern, of course, was if we're going to change interest rates, how is that going to impact different parts of the economic strata? And of course, the interest rates impact the lower income portion of the strata much more than the more affluent. But that was a finding. And again, we've kind of already talked about this. The codes, we're changing codes. We should be proud of ourselves. In the last 10 years, we've really improved the energy efficiency components of our building codes. We no longer need to be embarrassed when we talk to our European counterparts. Our buildings are getting to be as energy efficient as theirs. But again, we're taking builders and designers out of their tried and true comfort range by requiring them to build something different, and that's always an issue. And from that, we felt that building science was required to reduce the risk associated with these new constructions, to give confidence to the people who are coming up with new designs, more energy efficient designs, that these can work. We can build moisture durable buildings, we can build energy efficient buildings, but we can also build buildings that have both of those features. There are fewer options. You need to be a little bit more clever in your selection, but you can do it. So the whole purpose of the exercise, let's reduce risk. We'll never be perfect. We're building, our construction involves human beings. Human beings are imperfect. Our buildings will never be perfect. But we can take steps to make them more tolerant. And I think that's always a step in the right direction. And that's kind of the backstory of why we chose to develop the Building Science Advisor. It's the gorilla in terms of moisture control, in terms of durability. Moisture is the culprit that we're trying to control. And anything that we can do to reduce moisture-related problems in buildings should have a fairly significant impact, since moisture is responsible for $30 billion a year of problems. So we decided to tackle that as our goal. So lots of other ways of helping people, and here's a bunch of silliness which you could read. And of course, nobody will do any of these things. But if we can create a tool that people can access easily, use quickly, not invest a lot of time, get an instantaneous response, then we thought those features might be something that would lead people to use the tool and hopefully be convinced that the tool is leading them to a better design. So here we are. This is our approach behind the Building Science Advisor. You get instant information. The Building Science Advisor is usually online, except when we're updating it and modifying it, which is periodically. But you can get nominally instant access. It's web-based. I'll give you the the website in a second. It uses an expert system, and I'll describe what that is. And I think it's the first time an expert system has been used in terms of moisture management, and it's really required. And I'll describe why that's true in a later slide. And what it does is we've tried to gather the best information that's available in terms of designing durable wall systems. And this comes from expert meetings where we've petitioned feedback from all of the famous building science experts in the US. We've done a very substantial literature search looking for field studies, laboratory studies, experiments that have yielded results in terms of moisture durability of building envelopes. We've looked at the building codes. The building codes have some requirements in terms of selection of vapor retardants, for example, for different climate zones. And with all of that, we then filled in the blank using our hydrothermal models. And we've created basically a collection of knowledge which is accessible through the website. So this is the front page of the website. It's under we're actually updating it. It's going to change a little bit in the next week or so, but this is kind of what it looks like today. And it has a bunch of different selection items. One of the items you can look at is what's called pre-assessment, and this is basically if you're going to do a recladding or a retrofit of your building for energy efficiency, are there other things you ought to consider before you take on that project? Examples are if you're living in an older home, what do you do with the lead paint that's sitting on that interior facade of the building? How about the asbestos and some of the cladding systems that were used a number of years ago? What happens if you know that this building envelope has leaked? Uh, do I have durability problems, or is there a structural issue that needs to be addressed? Do I have mold in the walls that needs to be mitigated? So this pre-assessment button doesn't give you that information, but what it does is it leads you to, we did a literature survey. We identified what we think might be some of the best sources of information on these pre-assessment topics. And we basically just give you the links and go dig and find out the information that you need. Once you get past that and you've decided that you can do a retrofit, then the tool offers you options. You can look at new construction, or you can look at retrofitting an existing assembly. In the new construction mode, it asks you to input the structure that you're considering to build, and where is it? And in the existing in the retrofit mode, what it does is it asks you to input the existing construction. And so after you do that, new construction is going to basically rate you in terms of your energy performance and your durability. And if you fail the pass-fail criteria in the tool, it gives you recommendations on how to improve your design. In the retrofit mode, you've input the existing structure, and it gives you a listing of recommended retrofits that will both improve the energy efficiency and the durability of the structure. You can then select through them and decide which one you want to follow up on. So it makes recommendations on moisture performance and energy. Uh, it gives you some suggestions in terms of improvements. And here's the website down at the bottom, bsa.ornl.gov. Uh, it should be online. We are updating it in the next couple of weeks. So you may or may not, you might hit it at the wrong time, but it is online, and you should be able to use it immediately if you're interested in trying it. So how does this expert system work? Well, expert systems are kind of built of three parts. You have the user interface, which is really the website. This is where you're going to input, we'll use the new construction option. You're going to input the wall that you're considering to build. And then on the other side of the expert system is a knowledge base, or more specifically, a database. What we've done is we've built a database based on, again, the expert opinions, the literature surveys, the building codes, hydrothermal and energy modeling, and we've created a database of somewhere between 70 and 75,000 combinations of wall assemblies. So it's a fairly substantial database. The way this tool works is the inference engine will take the information that the user inputs, translates it into the information that the database needs to find matches, and then we'll give to the user the output of the database that matches the inquiry that the user has input. So, I said there are like 75,000 assemblies that are in the database, but when you think about it, that's really not very many. Think about how many components in a wall assembly will impact the moisture performance. And there are about 10 of them: the cladding, the insulations, your water barrier, your air barrier sheathings, vapor retarders, your finishes. And each one of these has a dozen or maybe more options in terms of the different materials that you can use. And of course, if you start taking, 12 different inputs or 10 different inputs, and each one having, 10 different options. If you multiply that out, you end up with millions and millions of combinations, which makes my 75,000 simulations seem trivial. But a way of reducing all of that is by trying to bin these properties or these materials by their material property, which is significant in terms of their moisture transport. So, as an example, in the cladding category, you've got I don't know 10 or so different types of claddings that are there. What the inference engine does is it takes the input of the user, which is the specific material type. So if you're a user and you say, okay, I want to build a wall and I want brick as my cladding, well, the inference engine will take that and it will convert that brick into an absorptive cladding. It will also take stone and convert it into an absorptive cladding. So it's going to treat brick and stone exactly the same way, and it will not be able to differentiate, make that fine differentiation. So it's going to take all cladding materials and basically just create two categories. They're either absorptive or not absorptive. And so this is why the tool is kind of like a one significant figure type tool. You can't make these fine comparisons because to create that database is just cost prohibitive. And so what we've tried to do is reduce the number of combinations by coupling the materials to the important material property. This table kind of lists the ones that the way we've done that combination. It's not perfect. If you want a much more detailed analysis, then you can go back and run the hydrothermal model if you have that knowledge or hire somebody to do it. But if a one significant figure is good enough, then the building science advisor can accomplish that by using this inference engine, which reduces the number of overall combinations of materials that comprise a wall assembly. Okay, so talked a little bit about this, the pre-assessment page. You got a whole bunch of links. If you click on any of these links, you'll get a number of different references. It's pretty complete. If anybody had a favorite reference that they think we should add to this list, boy, I certainly would appreciate hearing that. I'd be glad to, we pick these based on the technical content, not on who did it. And any recommendations of reports or studies that address some of these issues, I think would glad to add those links to the building science advisor. So share with us, and we'd be glad to accommodate those sorts of anything that makes the tool better. Just dying to do that. Okay, so when you want to use the tool, you start off with one of the most important things: where is the building? And we basically limit it to the continental U.S. and Hawaii and the U.S. I should say continental, and it's broken up into the 16 climate zones that are identified in ASHRAE as well as by the Department of Energy. So you click and select the zone that the building is going to be constructed. After you do that, you then choose the type of analysis you want. Do you want to use new construction, or do you want to do a retrofit? And in the retrofit mode, you're offered three options. You're offered the option of, well, all I want to do is an exterior retrofit. And if I select that, then the only modifications I can make to the wall would be those layers of the wall assembly that I can access from the exterior side. So I limit that to the cavity. I can't change the inside vapor retarder. I'm not changing the sheetrock. I'm not changing the interior finish. Another option is I'm doing an interior finish. And again, in that case, I can modify all the layers to the exterior sheathing. Now I can change the interior finish. I can change the sheetrock. I can change the cavity, but I can't do anything outboard of the cavity. And finally, the last option is a gut. The only thing in that option I can't change is the actual structure. If I have 2x6 framing, then everything else is game except that I'm going to end up with 2x6 framing. Then I need to identify the wall. So the wall, again, in a new construction, this is what I want to build. If it's a retrofit, this is what it exists. And all of these options are drop-down menus. So you select from the drop-down menus. They're fairly complete. Again, to limit the size of the database, especially when you get into some of the wall structures, we're pretty much limited to stick framing, metal framing, and masonry. We we tried to cover 80 to 90% of the waterfront in terms of structures that are being built today. It doesn't include esoteric systems. It doesn't include super insulated systems. Uh, we do have some resources to expand the database this year. And if anybody plays with this and says, son of a gun, I wish I had this sort of structure, then let us know, because we are going to do some expansion. Primarily, our focus right now, I think, is one of the systems that's not in the database now is a wall that doesn't have any exterior structural sheathing, and that you're putting just foam sheathing on the continuous insulation as an exterior sheathing. And that seems to be, an inexpensive construction practice, so therefore a popular construction practice. And that's not in the database today. The way the database is presently configured, you must have a structural sheathing. So that's one addition we're going to make. We've got some resources to also add additional structures. So if you get any ideas, share them with us. We appreciate that. So you basically go down this list and you select all of these different components. These are the components that we feel have some impact on the moisture durability and the thermal performance of the structure. If you want to know a little bit more about what we're trying to get at, you can hit these little arrows to the left of the component title, and you get some help information on what we're trying to accomplish there and how we've differentiated between the different options in the drop-down menus. So let's assume that this is a retrofit, and this is the wall that exists. So we've got basically a non-absorptive cladding. It has a ventilated airspace behind it, no continuous insulation. We have house wrap, a wood-based exterior sheathing. Again, you can see we've combined a number of these. It won't differentiate between OSB and plywood, because all of these are nominally similar in terms of their hydrothermal performance. The wall structure is going to be 2x6. I've got some low density insulation in the cavity. I've got a polyethylene sheet on the interior side, and I painted it with latex paint. After I've done all of that, I then hit the calculate, and in a retrofit mode, what you get is a whole family of different recommendations. And you can see, I cut it off. It'll tell you how many you have. And sometimes the numbers are scary. But what you can do, here is all of the different layers in the structure. You can tell it that I want a very specific output. For example, in the cladding, I've selected unfinished wood. I want to have wood shakes. And so I'm limiting my choices to just wood shakes. I'm limiting my choices to no airspace. I'm limiting my continuous insulation to EPS. I'm using fiberglass in the cavities. And so it's eliminating all of the other options that are in the database. However, I didn't choose to limit the vapor retarder, so I can get any vapor retarder type that I want. I didn't choose to limit the insulation thickness, so I can go in here and modify my selection. If I have some specific wants, I can include those. If I don't have any, I can just get the gazillion outputs that are going to be durable, and then you can start reducing that number by the more specific you get in terms of your selection, the fewer options obviously you're going to have show up on this recommendation menu. Now, if this was a new construction, you wouldn't get the screen. What you would get is this screen, and you basically will go immediately to the final results. And this screen is identical for new construction and for the retrofit. In the new construction, you just have the existing wall or the proposed wall. In the retrofit, you'll have the new wall construction. So in this particular case, you can see that I've limited it to this is an exterior retrofit. So the only layers that I can change and the only recommendations that come out of the tool are things that I can access from the exterior side. It then tells me what the moisture durability is. And this is basically a scale from 1 to 6. if you hit the little question mark that's right to the right of the moisture durability, what it tells you is that the tool is looking at the mold index as it's developed in ASHRAE standard 160. And according to the ASHRAE standard, if you get a I'm sorry, go back. If you get a value of 0 to 2, that's well in the pass range. And so that's what's shown here as green. If you get a value of 2 to 3, then you're kind of in the, you're kind of in the, think of a stoplight, right? You can run the stoplight and probably be okay most of the time. This is kind of in the risky stage. And above 3, you probably shouldn't be building that wall. And so what you see in this gauge here is there are 2 arrows. The light blue arrow tells you where the wall was before you retrofit it, and the dark blue arrow tells you where it is after you've retrofitted. So in this particular case, I've added continuous insulation. I've added an inch of polyiso. I've added some cavity insulation, and primarily the continuous insulation typically always improves the moisture durability of the wall structure. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. When you put continuous insulation on the exterior facade of the wall, then all of your moisture sensitive components, your exterior sheathing, your wood framing, they all begin to approach the temperature and relative humidity of the inside of the building. And walls, like humans, like low levels of relative humidity. And so adding continuous insulation typically leads to an improvement in the moisture durability. And of course, since I've added all of that insulation, my R value is skyrocketed, right? I went from an R of 3, shame on me for having that wall, to an R of 18. And I don't remember what climate zone this is. I think this is climate zone 4 or 5. It does show on the graphic what the 2018 building code requirements were for that climate zone. And we are upgrading that. We are going to go to the 2021. And I think 2021 is very close to 2018. But when the 2024 code comes out, we'll update it again to change the baselines. Retrofits, of course, don't need to meet the code requirements. At least we don't have code requirements for retrofit applications today. But I think in California they do in some instances. But that's something we probably need to think about to somehow accelerate the energy improvement of the existing building stock. So here's just some examples. This is a new construction, climate zone 6A. So we're living up in Minneapolis and the cold part of the U.S. What I've constructed here was a vinyl siding. I've got a drainage plane behind that. I put an inch of extruded polystyrene. Really, continuous insulation helps a whole lot in northern climates. I'm using house wrap, a wood-based structural sheathing. This is a 2x6 wall, fiberglass insulated craft paper. So I have some vapor control on the interior side. In northern climates, you really need to be careful about controlling moisture from the interior side, especially when you're doing retrofits. If you're doing an exterior retrofit, you don't have access to the vapor retarder. And if there's none, that might be problematic. And the tool will very quickly point out where that's a problem. And this is one of the uses, I think, of the tool. Do I have to dig into that wall further to do something about interior vapor control? And then finally, I've got drywall and latex paint. And the BSA tells you, boy, that's a wonderful wall. It gives you a durability index of very near 0. Get an R of 23 for that wall. Probably doesn't meet the 24 code requirements. I think that's pretty close to the 2018 code requirements. You folks probably know that better than I do. And so the durability is acceptable in this particular construction. One of the things that's built into the tool is these guidance sheets. And these are somewhat useful if you end up with, for example, no recommendations for your retrofit, or if you're inputting a new wall and you're running into a problem, the tool is going to say, you ought to take a look at interior vapor control, or you ought to make sure you have a drainage plane in there. And then it gives you these one-page summations of what is a drainage plane, why is it important, why do you want to build it, how do you build it, and the like. And if you want to, keep on digging, well, there's a whole bunch of other recommendations. There's a lot of stuff from Building Science Corp. Their website has a lot of useful information, and we've stolen appreciably, with their blessing, of course, referencing a lot of their documents. And then the other source of substantial information that we use significantly is the Building America Solutions Center. I don't know how many of you have gone there, but there's also a lot of construction related guidance um, at that website, and you can actually access the Building Science Advisor directly from their website as well. You don't have to use our link. So you can kind of go down the rabbit hole as far as you want, because obviously all of these references have further references. And if you want to become the world's expert on any one of these particular topics, have at it. The links to get you started are there. Okay, what doesn't it replace? Well, as I said, there is a database. It's pretty extensive, but it is limited, and there are a lot of systems that will not be covered by the Building Science Advisor. When you hit those drop-down menus, you're going to say, "God, how come they don't have SIPs?" And "God, how come they don't have ICFs?" And "How come they don't have double studs?" Well, what we tried to do when we initiated this project is to again focus on as much of the construction that's ongoing, and kind of didn't include some of the fringe, you know all of these other systems don't make up a substantial part of the market, and so we wanted to start off with those systems that did. And as I said earlier, we are adding, and if you've got a system that should be here, absolutely you can't live without, send me that recommendation and we'll try to accommodate. Uh, you don't want to get away from the building consultant, the building expert. Again, this is focused on the midsection of the building envelope universe. When you get on the fringes, you're going to need that. And of course, you can run your own hydrothermal models. We've made some assumptions to simplify the number of options in our inference engine. If that's not satisfactory for your specific application, then you could just either hire somebody or run a hydrothermal model. The purpose of the BSA, I think, was to put into hands of people who are not familiar with running simulation tools the capability of getting the bulk of that sort of information or that output without having to physically run the tool. So don't give up on these guys. We're not recommending that either of these two categories of people and tools go away. I forgot about this. There's the website of the Building Science. The Building America Solutions Center. This is managed by our pretty sister Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Lots of information. This is their front page as of a couple of months ago. BSA was on the page, but there's lots and lots and lots of useful information here. If you're ever bored and have an afternoon to kind of go digging, this would be a good place to go if you haven't been there already. And with that, I'd like to just kind of come to closure. I think moisture is a big problem, $32 billion a year problem in terms of renovations and repairs. Worth focusing on trying to come up with tools to mitigate or reduce the amount of moisture related damage in building envelopes. This tool gives you answers pretty much instantaneously. The first time you use the tool, it might take you 10 or 15 minutes to walk your way through it. The second time, it might take you 2 minutes. The third time, it might take you 30 seconds. It's very, very fast. The answers are instantaneous. As soon as you hit compute, you get the answer because it's basically just looking up in a database. There's no model running in the background, which really slows down the process. We've argued about what's the best way of creating this tool. If you have a model, then you can have much greater number of options to work with. But then you got to sit there and wait for 2 to 2.5 minutes for the model to run. And then if you have multiple people trying to access the tool, it can be much longer than that. So we decided to go to the database route, which limits the number of the number of options in terms of what's in the database, but you get your answer very, very, very rapidly. So both features have pluses and minuses. We've chosen the database route, and again, if somebody wants the modeling tool, well, you can again just get the tool, hire a consultant. You can get the detail coming out of a computer simulation, and that's it. Glad to entertain any questions or comments that people have.
Hey, thank you so much, Andre. There are several questions here, and before we get to them, just real quick, for those of you who want to rewatch this session, share it with your friends, colleagues. Catch anything you missed, you head over to our YouTube channel. You can click subscribe now and get an instant update. And if you're looking for your CEUs and you're watching this on the recording, so not right now, but in the future, make sure to take your quiz with an 80% passing rate. For those of you who are here live, check your spam at certs@gutenbergcerts.com, and you will receive your certificate there if you've been here for the entire CEU approved hour. And before we get to those questions, a huge thanks again to our board of directors, our volunteers, our over 300 members who support our work, and our sponsors, especially our top tier sponsors, Mitsubishi and Rheem, who are helping you go all electric, decarbonize, and make our home systems better. So, Andre, there is a whole large wish list of things coming in, and I've added to the list. And so we're not going to get through all of those, obviously, today. We're going to send those to you so you have them and can respond, and hopefully it's helpful to you. It's big and it's great, and it's great to see everybody providing feedback and ideas and supporting
Yeah,
those ideas.
absolutely.
So there's a lot, but there's a few wish lists that maybe are worth bringing up or talking about, I think, in the context of the questions. And so one of our audience members earlier on made an observation. He was kind of looking at the tool as we were talking. And so he just kind of made a point that, if there's an existing home retrofit with no insulation and 2x4 construction, it seems like a full intervention outside of a gut poses a total moisture risk just in general. And so there is that. And I want to add a little more context to that question. And so I was looking at the insulation choices, and I was surprised by two things. I was surprised that in the wall cavity, I didn't see cellulose, but I saw mineral instead, which was very surprising. To not that only I didn't see cellulose, but I saw mineral. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is, and I'm thinking back to what our guest said here, drill and fill. That seems to have been that's just like, right, like, let's just drill and fill all these walls. Let's just get them all insulated. It's going to reduce energy. And, I think that was sort of the solution 10, 15 years ago. And we started saying, wait a minute, this is going to potentially present all sorts of risk by drill and filling all these old homes with, in that time, mostly cellulose, right? I still think that's still the suggested manner. So, let's say someone goes to do this system and they want to go do a drill and fill project. What my hope would be is that it's sending up the alarm bells, because I assume, all the other moisture issues are not being dealt with. And so I guess my question more is, when do we get cellulose, right? And then number two is, speaking at a broader term, you've got all these empty homes with nothing going on. Drill and fill is going to get proposed. How can we speak to, how we handle that, as we start to see that pick up, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, perhaps to some extent paying for that kind of work.
Yeah. So cellulose is there.
Oh, it is.
It sits right next to fiberglass, and it's in the
Oh,
same
I'm
line.
sorry. It is there now. I'm
So
sorry. Okay.
from a moisture control perspective, the addition of loose fill cellulose and loose fill fiberglass is pretty much the same. For a short period of time, people made it this big case that cellulose absorbs water, and some people said, well, that's good because I've added to the hydric capacity of the wall. And some people said, well, that's bad because that's going to cause moisture related problems. But the reality is that your exterior sheathing and your wood studs absorb 10 times more than the insulation, the cavity insulation. And so, again, for a one significant bigger type of analysis, cellulose and fiberglass are treated the same. And what you find
Mm,
if you exercise the building science advisor, because somebody had brought up exactly the question you brought up, is that if you don't use any continuous insulation in northern climates, you get failures, uh, because you get too much moisture from the interior of the building getting into the exterior sheathing,
mm,
and you get mold growth on the exterior sheathing. So you need to do one of two things. One is if you put enough continuous insulation along with the
mm,
drill and fill, then
mm,
you can mitigate that problem. And the tool can tell you how much continuous insulation R value you need to accomplish that. Or you gotta do what you said, which is a gut, and then you gotta put some form of moisture control, even if it's just one
mm,
perm. Craft paper is
mhm,
probably enough. Uh, but again, you can try all of these options and then very quickly, because the tool gives you the answers so rapidly. The answers are different for Chicago than they are for
mm,
Minneapolis than they are for Duluth, because we're kind of getting in colder and colder climate zones. So the colder you go, the more continuous insulation you need to get around the lack of an interior vapor retarder. And in some
mm,
instances, you just can't get there. And
mm,
so uh, you you get the
mm.
red flag, and stop and do something different.
Yeah. So it sounds like in summary that and my apologies, I do see the cellulose now. It is there. So you could put the drill and fill option as an option, and you'll probably see without any other remedial efforts, it's going to be a risk, correct? Is that
For the
depending on
north,
your
yeah,
zone?
the further north you go,
Yeah.
the more risky it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, staying with the north here, we got a lot of northern folks, so we're a bit biased. I'm here in climate zone 5 in Michigan. Someone pointed out that they saw they were able to get in climate zone 6 a pass on just 1 inch. And I know some of your colleagues over there at PNL highly advocate for 2 inches of exterior insulation. Is there a glitch in the tool? Maybe they didn't do it right, or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, more is always better. And the more continuous insulation that you put on the exterior facade, the closer all of your moisture sensitive materials will be
Mm-hmm.
to your interior climate.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in some instances you can, remember the tool is telling you what you can get away with. Uh, if 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 your goal, you may need the extra inch of
Mm-hmm.
insulation to meet the energy code requirement. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar enough with the specifics of the code and what level, what year is uh, what year of the code
Mm-hmm.
is being used in those different options.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I don't. I've looked at most of the recommendations in the solution center, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a problem with them. They,
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, I think they might be
Mm-hmm.
overly conservative from a moisture control perspective, but none of them will yield a failure. So going more is it's American, right? More is better, right? And let's go for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know for those of you who are just here for the continuing education hour of this, and you've been here for this whole session, you're dismissed to go. You should be approved, and we don't want to make you stay, but we would love for you to stay. We've got a lot more questions. Andre, it sounds like you're okay with sticking around for a little bit to
Sure.
answer some of these questions. So we just want to be respectful of those of you who are like, hey, do I have to stay for my CUs? No, you're all set if you've been here, but we do encourage people to stick around, and we're going to keep talking for a little bit longer to help, hopefully get through some of these questions.
Yeah.
So,
Brett, also, if anybody, thinks of another question, my email address is on that last slide. And if you're patient with me, I will get back to you. But give me a couple of days or so, because I'm usually involved in fire drills. So as soon as there are no fire drills, I'll get back to you. And like I said, especially if you have some, a specific question or some
yeah,
specific recommendations,
yeah,
please share that with me.
yeah. So roofing, it connects with the wall. The foundation, it connects with the wall. Um, what impact does, the roofing have, and is that going to be considered especially if you're talking about situations where you've got poor water management practices on the roof. I suspect the foundation, less of an issue because that's, water has moved its way down at that point. But what can you tell us about that, and what some thoughts are going into the roofing part of the assembly when you're considering all this?
Yeah. So adding attics to the building science advisors on our
Mm,
on our Christmas list.
yeah.
We started with walls because there seems to be both a much greater variety of construction practices,
Mm,
and
mm,
seems like there's a lot more litigation associated with walls than attics. I don't know, maybe other people would contradict that, but my casual observation when I
mm,
get a call from a lawyer who wants to hire me as a consultant, and I say no, thank you. Um, a lot of
mm,
times it's
mm,
more associated with
mm.
walls. But attics are on our radar screen. They're a little bit more difficult to model because of uh, the ventilation within the attic, which makes them a little bit more difficult to capture. Uh, we have to go to a two-dimensional model as opposed to a one-dimensional model, which is what we use in our for our wall assemblies. But it is on our radar screen. Um, but it seems as if the number of problems seems to be somewhat less. What are the appropriate ventilation rates is always an interesting question. Uh, Sealed versus unsealed attics are always a question. What do I do with my ceiling plane? Do I have to make and reduce the permeability of that? Uh, so there are some big questions, but in general, I think the number of permutations are a lot a lot smaller than attics, but than walls. But yeah, it's there, and we appreciate that, and
Mm.
you given some
Mm.
continuing financial support, that will occur. We started with the walls because the builder said the walls were a bigger headache. That's
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
that was really why we started there.
Yeah. And to hone in on that point, as you mentioned, Andre, the more people who are using this and making informed decisions and showing it to other people, you're saying, hey, maybe you can get the funds to raise to improve it. I also saw some comments from, our Canadian friends, Climate Zone 7, people chiming in. Maybe you reach out, I don't know, to the Canadian government. Hey, let's work together on this. Maybe that brings you some more money. I don't know. I'm just throwing out some ideas for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
there,
I thought all of the water in Canada was in the solid form, but maybe I'm not right on that.
yeah, it's all just pure ice up there, so it doesn't matter. So another kind of interesting question that came in at the beginning was just, is there a discussion potentially for how the HVAC systems and dehumidification systems, or likely thereof, lack of thereof, may play a role in this, or maybe it doesn't play a role? I mean, that was just a question. I wanted
Yeah,
to put it out there.
no, that is a good question. One of the limitations to the database, if you actually read uh, all the help information, you'd find this. I don't even remember where it is right now, but the our interior, our conditioning equipment impacts our interior relative humidity, and that has a substantial impact on the moisture performance of our building envelope.
Mhm.
Uh, our models allow us to adjust what those interior levels of relative
Mhm.
humidity are over the course of the year and over the course of a day. Uh, but right now in the database,
Mhm.
again, just to get started, we're assuming kind of
Mhm.
an average. It's 35% RH in the winter, 15% RH in the summer. If you're in a building that is uh, has high occupancy, or has a lot of air leakage. Maybe those RH levels are too
Mhm.
high in the winter, too low in the summer. But there's only one choice right
Mhm.
now, and one of the uh, options that we've proposed to DOE to add would be some
Mhm.
additional selection. So it wouldn't. It's not directly associated with the equipment per se, but we do know that unfortunately high efficiency equipment doesn't run as long as so is somewhat of a less reliable dehumidifier than our older equipment. But we ought to be able to again have our high efficiency equipment and have a building that doesn't compost. So we need to look at those combinations as well. And that's if everybody writes to the congressman, that would help. But uh, there's so much to do here.
Mhm.
There's so many places to go, and
Yeah.
it really becomes a question of
Mhm.
what's the biggest priority.
Yeah. And one question that came up that was interesting is what is the assumption on the uh how properly installed these systems are? So, obviously it's one thing to say they're there. I think of, the installation with the energy rating index, right? The grading of the HERS scores. You can kind of grade the system. But yeah, what kind of assumptions are just made on in the tool right now from the how proper
Yeah,
they were installed?
yeah, no, that's also an excellent question. And I guess the answer is probably not going to be very satisfying, but I'll give you the answer anyway. And that is that uh, all of our models, if you think about it, all of our models assume proper installation.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not doing it right, then why are you running a model? You've got bigger problems than running a model. So
Right.
it does assume that
Mm,
the materials have been installed. Now you can cheat, I mean,
mm,
there are ways of cheating. For example, if just look at
mm,
the air permeability of the weather resistant barrier. If you know it wasn't
mm,
installed properly, then artificially pick a different material that has
mm,
a higher air permeance, and that kind of
mm,
will capture to some extent the impact of improper installation. But what it doesn't do
mm,
is when we do installations imperfectly, we typically localize our failure, and it doesn't capture the localization of the failure. It's always taking that increase in air permeance, for example, and washing it over the entire surface of the wall. It's not localizing it to a specific point. And when you have, construction defects, you typically, and I'm sure all your audience knows this 10 times better than I, your failures are, to specific locations. And it's very rare that you see, you know, the entire exterior sheathing covered with mold, or rotting. It's usually near near where the imperfection is. And none of our models can capture that, whether it be an energy model or a durability model. Obviously, it's more important in a durability model. In an energy model, if it costs you 5% more for your energy, it doesn't matter if it's a
mm,
local leak or a leak all over the wall. But in a durability
mm,
model, it makes a big difference. And at this point, we're not smart enough to be able to figure that one out.
mhm. Um, a question just on applicability, renovation, new construction. What about light commercial, multifamily? Is it something that could apply to those building types?
It really applies to every building. The
Okay.
only limitation is that the the options that are in the database are focused on residential. So clearly, anything that's built with an east system, for example, is fine. Whether it's on a Home Depot or a Lowe's or somebody's house, it doesn't matter. It's still an east
Mhm,
system, steel studs.
mm,
It doesn't matter. It is going to. It does assume interior conditions of temperature and relative humidity that are more consistent for residents. It also assumes 24/7 occupation of the building. So, in some commercial buildings, you shut everything down when you leave at 6 o'clock in the evening. And so the interior conditions would be somewhat different than a residential construction. But the actual probably the biggest limitation is what are the physical options available for on the drop down menus for the wall assembly. And then everything else I think kind of is probably a more of a second order effect. So uh, again, adding more systems to the database, whether they be more residential or more commercial based. I get yelled at depending on who I talk to, based on what I should do there.
yeah. Yeah, that sounds that sounds about right with tools like these. Um, what kind of suggestions you have for now for someone who's got a different R value situation than what is being presented for the installation? Should you just round down, round up? What makes the most sense?
Yeah, we again we have the drop down menus are the label R values of the traditional insulation products, right? I think, if you're conservative, uh, what you want to do in cavity insulation is to round down. You want to reduce the R value to the Achilles heel of moisture control is typically the exterior sheathing. And so, if you want to be conservative, you want to increase the moisture flow to the exterior sheathing from the inside, which means reducing the R value because that drops the temperature of the sheathing. And so you'll get more flow, or reduce the R value of the continuous insulation. So in both instances, I would round to a lower R value.
Probably makes sense to be safe on energy modeling softwares too, to do that. So you're not,
Yeah,
over predicting. Yep.
yeah, that's true.
Um, what kind of alignment does this program have with some of the residential green building programs? So I know, like, for example, those who are using Lead for Homes or Enterprise or even components of the National Green Building Standard, they're probably following the water management checklist presented by Energy Star. So what kind of alignment, does it have with that? Have you seen it getting used in green building programs at all?
Yeah, this is we just launched this back in September.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Hmm,
and yes, I would love to try to align
hmm,
what we're doing or replace what's there.
hmm,
But the checklists are usually good because I think the checklist gets you to focus on details.
hmm,
Uh, the tool is again more
hmm,
generally. I think one of the things that the tool is good at is uh, I can have 3 or 4 different assemblies that all quote unquote pass, but some are a whole lot better than others. And it gives me options in terms of what I can build. And it quasi quantifies those that are better than others. So if I have 3 choices and cost obviously is a factor. If the cost is nominally the same, then I can lean towards a better selection. But I have been talking to the folks at ResNet. I like to consider this as being an add-on to their HERS rating. And but a lot of these conversations are just started, and
yeah.
if in fact maybe you would be a good
Hmm.
help in terms of identifying folks that I should talk to, because this whole world is new to me. The green standards is not something that I follow closely, and but if I want to implement what we've developed here, you know, I need to put my begging pants on and my sales suit on and go talk to them. But yeah, no, I'd like to do that, but that's also I've got work for the next 5 years. I'm all set.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, and yeah, definitely. I think that is of interest, and some great folks here, I think, would be interested in that. And one of the questions came up, and what you said about ResNet, I think resonates with that question. And because I'm thinking about the inputs here, and I'm thinking, a lot of the inputs for a ResNet, a HERS rating, an energy rating index inputs, and even I've experienced on a couple of your adding insulation before resiting projects over with your PNNL colleagues that I've been
Yeah,
involved in. It's really cool because I see the reports come back with the home energy score, the DOE home energy score, along with your tool to supplement that to give more information about what's going on in those walls. So it was really great to see those kind of reports come over and have conversations about that. And that's what actually tipped me off to this tool. So yeah, it almost seems just, hey, a lot of these inputs, they're already there. Why couldn't we generate a HERS index? Why couldn't we generate a DOE score and then add a couple more things, right? And then supplementally generate a BSA rating. It just seems like
yeah.
you could do both, and then that prevents the sort of tool overload duplication. So on that note, the question is just, in where does this kind of compare to Woofy, and how you would maybe use the two in tandem? You and I were talking about it, but just kind of for the audience, could you explain
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So the tool, as I mentioned earlier, is a huge database, and a very large percentage of the information in the database comes from WUPI simulations. So they're connected at the hip. Uh, what's different between the WUFI simulation and what's in the BSA
Hmm.
is the
Mm,
discussion that we had about the inference engine and not being able to
mm,
cover all of the small differences in material properties. Again, treating
mm,
stucco and brick and stone all the same. If you want to have a very uh, uh, precise analysis, then you want to use the hydrothermal tool. If a one significant figure number is good enough for you, then the BSA should give you a similar result. In fact, a lot of
mm,
times when,
mm,
especially when early on in the
mm,
development, uh, the tool is giving improper recommendations. And the first thing I would do when somebody pointed that out to me was to run a Whoopi simulation and say, oh, yeah, they're right,
mm,
and why did I screw up? And then, of course, I would always blame the webmaster because they didn't put the database wrong, but
mm,
because it couldn't be my fault. Uh, but the intent is, the database is basically a Whoopi database. About 90, well, probably 95% of what's in the database is hydrothermal simulation.
yeah,
Uh, and so they should yield
mm,
similar results with less granular. The BSA gives you less granularity. I guess maybe that's the best way of describing it.
yeah,
Woofy allows you to, we talked a little bit earlier, modify the interior boundary conditions. The BSA assumes one. So they're, again, to make the tool workable and to be able to produce a database that's economically reasonable.
mm,
Those sorts of
mm,
simplifying assumptions, which impact the precision, had to be made.
yeah. And where would smart vapor retarders? I mean, I know it doesn't look like that option's in there, but just in general, where are you seeing those kind of fall in helping, or are they effective at moisture durability in the walls?
Uh, we've spoken back and forth about putting the smart vapor retarder in the database. We have a little bit of heartburn in that we're a government entity and there's only one company that makes that product, and
Hmm.
it's so that's a little bit of an issue for us. We don't want to be
Hmm.
promoting, you know a
Hmm.
specific brand, and even though you can say that
Hmm.
generically, it's really not
Hmm.
generic. But typically, what you see with a smart vapor retarder is that it becomes fairly permeable at high levels of relative humidity and doesn't become a vapor trap. So from a from an ex for being applied as an exterior air barrier, air and water resistant barrier, it's valuable. On the interior side, um, being used as a vapor retarder, which is, I think, its primary application. Uh, it does help in some instances. Again, it
Right.
depends on where your moisture source is. If you're trying to dry to the
Hmm.
interior, then having that high permeance and high relative humidities is a real value.
Hmm.
From moisture sources from the interior going out, it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter, because at those levels of relative humidity, you get the same performance with a piece of craft paper. So uh, depends. I love that answer, right? It depends. I guess I could
Right.
answer every question that way, but
Yeah.
in this particular case, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone back and forth with the smart vapor retarder. We had it in there for a while, and then we yanked it.
Hmm.
I'm not sure where we're going to end up, and the big issue is just
Hmm.
this question of,
Hmm.
federally
Hmm.
funded activity being, somewhat specific in terms of,
Hmm.
some people have asked us, can we pay you to put our products in there? Well,
Hmm.
the answer is no. We can't do
Hmm.
that. That's just not appropriate for a federal funded tool.
Right. Um, and I think I just wanted to get clarity here on a last question, and that was the the new. If I understand right, the renovation will suggest recommendations on what to change, what to do. For new construction, do you get recommendations, or is it more of just to keep playing with it until you get a good rating? I mean, how does that work?
If you end up with a poor rating, it gives you recommendations,
Oh,
but
when you get a poor rating. Okay.
it doesn't tell you what the structure is, but it tells you what to do. For example,
Hmm.
let's go to your example where we're building a wall in Michigan and we don't put any vapor retarder
Right.
and we drill and fill, or we fill the
Mm,
cavities with loose fill insulation. Then
mm,
the tool is going to sense that you're getting uh, high levels of
mm,
moisture on your exterior sheathing, and they're coming from the inside. So the tool is going to tell you uh, you need to increase the vapor
mm,
resistance on the inside.
right.
So it's not going to tell you what product to put there, but it'll point you to a
Mm,
potential suggestion. Then you go to the
mm,
tool, pick a more vapor
mm,
resistive vapor barrier, rerun it, and more than
mm.
likely you're going to see an improvement. It may not get a pass, but you'll see an improvement, and then maybe you might have to do it in a couple of iterations. But so it does give you that sort of recommendation. If you get a pass, if you get a value between 0 and 2, it just gives you a gold star
Yeah.
and doesn't give you any further recommendations.
Yeah. Well, Andre, I really appreciate you and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory having you out and explaining all this to us. And I appreciate everyone who's chimed in with different ideas and all of your thoughts. Thank you so much for that. Before we wrap up, just to, again, a reminder, where can people go to reach out, either contact you or learn more or access the Building Science Advisor?
Well, my email address is on the screen, so you can just reach out to me directly via email. The Building Science Advisor. If you Google Building Science Advisor, it's the first name that shows up, of course, or the email address is bsa.ornl.gov. So have at it. Love to hear from you. If you like it, don't like it. Well, if you don't like it, I'd like to hear more about why you don't like it and what I could do to make you like it. What is it not accomplishing in
Mm,
your mind?
mhm,
Remembering that again, it's not intended to be uh, a forensic tool to solve very
mm.
specific problems. It's meant to offer guidance in design. So again, if you need very specific analysis, that's what the models are for. This serves a somewhat different purpose.
All right. Well, again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Andre, thank you for your time and take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. So goodbye.
Happy Valentine's Day. Cheers.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day.